Incredible. One of the most well-known US military experts warns of a massive economic crash that will drag Bitcoin down. But Bitcoin will be the big beneficiary of this crash. Let's take a look at what's behind this. Additionally, we are witnessing one of the craziest rug pulls and one of the largest liquidations ever. And the Bitcoin community is outraged and is heavily criticizing Javier Milei, who is involved with his new meme coin. We'll also take a look at what's behind this. I briefly reported on this yesterday, but now there are some really extreme and wild statements, and the whole thing is going absolutely viral. People are absolutely losing it. Then we have David Sacks, the Crypto Czar, who is now talking about a massive announcement that's coming our way. We'll look into what's behind this, and we have one of the most well-known hedge fund managers, Tudor Jones, who is doubling down and really investing heavily in Bitcoin now. We have the new filings here that show Tudor Jones's firm is also heavily investing in Bitcoin. So it's absolutely wild what's happening here again. First, we have David Sacks, the crypto Caesar under President Donald Trump, and he says some important announcements are coming soon regarding Bitcoin and crypto. So he's not just saying one important announcement, but several important announcements are coming. And now you can be very, very excited. I mean, on one hand, there's the story with the Sovereign Wealth Fund, the state fund of the USA. Then there could be the Strategic Bitcoin Reserve, but it could also be something else. It could also be that regulation is coming. An announcement that is very likely to come is the stablecoin regulation, that there will be a clarification. I mean, many people assume that, and there's always talk of digital assets and such. It is very likely that something specific about Bitcoin will also come. We'll have to wait and see. The probability is somewhat lower here, but it's mainly about stablecoins for people, as we've already clarified in the last videos. Bitcoin only plays a minor role here in the USA, or rather, it does play a certain role, but definitely stablecoins are valued much higher here than Bitcoin. We need to pay very close attention to what the next announcements from the USA will be. And then a very, very important thing happens that we have more and more famous hedge fund managers, not small players, but really the biggest hedge fund managers, the biggest personalities who hold Bitcoin with their hedge funds. Tudor Jones has increased his holdings again, now holding 426 million in Bitcoin ETFs, almost as much as the Sovereign Wealth Fund of Abu Dhabi, or relatively similar, I think a bit less. Here we see Ray Dalio holding Bitcoin, Tudor Jones holding Bitcoin. All the relevant hedge funds are now holding Bitcoin. Of course, these are always just small allocations, I understand that, but it's a very, very positive sign. This means Tudor Investments, his company, reported in an F filing this afternoon that as of December 31st, it holds an IBIT value of $426.9 million. This is an increase compared to the nearly 4.4 million shares we held on September 30th. This means that Bitcoin, according to the filings at the end of 2024, was the largest stock or ETF position in Tudor's entire reported portfolio buy. So this is a really, really big deal happening here. We are not only seeing that Bitcoin is being bought here, but Bitcoin, as it appears now and as reported by Macroscope, is now the largest position. Of course, this won't be something like a 10% allocation or so, because a hedge fund is very diversified. We see here 2,944 names included in the portfolio, and then maybe Bitcoin is, I don't know, just a number. Thrown in 3% or something like that. I don't know the portfolio here, but it's already a relevant thing. Maybe it's even just 1% or less than 1%. But the fact that Bitcoin is the largest position here is definitely a statement. I was surprised myself, so I'm not sure if this is correct, but Macroscope is actually a reputable source. You could see it, which clearly means it's the largest ETF or stock, respectively. Stock position in his portfolio. Macroscope says this, and now we really need to look at two very, very important topics. First, the Millet story. Second, the crash warning from the military experts. But here a positive crash for Bitcoin. So not a negative crash for Bitcoin, but a positive crash for Bitcoin. But first, let's delve into the Millet story. I already touched on this yesterday when it was all still very fresh, and I simply said, okay, there's now a rug pull, etc. However, a lot of things have now come to light, and many people are truly shocked. We have some comments here about this meme coin, which was apparently launched by Milei. Then he later denied it, saying no, he had nothing to do with the meme coin, he just shared it. But he only removed the post from his social media profile after the rug pull had already been completely executed. And that's why many people are now accusing him of fraud. We now have the biggest presidents in the world, Donald Trump, Millet, who are massively pulling off some scams. I mean, give it to yourself, I've always thought very, very highly of him. I actually still think very highly of him. You really have to see it from both sides. I don't know how directly Milei was involved, whether he was just somehow exploited here or if he really had something to do with it actively. It is said here that Javier Milei completely destroyed the market with his Libra meme coin, and within 5 hours, 4.4 billion were simply erased. So just a rug pull here. There are also some really intense clips on the internet that I can't even play here, where people are completely freaking out because they've lost all their money. That's why here's another warning. Hey, if you're getting into these meme coin stories and such, just be sure that it's highly speculative. I wouldn't recommend it to anyone. And it's so important to learn from this story and just keep the focus on Bitcoin. I keep telling you this, and then people always comment below, hey, wow, but I have this awesome meme coin and so on. I'm just saying, focus on Bitcoin. If you want to gamble with 10% of your portfolio, go ahead. But really keep the focus on Bitcoin. This way, you can avoid such rug pulls. And you can always see how it works. That means you have a meme coin, it gets pumped up, and then you see how the insiders sell, and the whole thing collapses, and then it's worth almost nothing. And we'll get to why the meme coin story is so important for Bitcoin in a moment. Sefadi Namu is the author of the Bitcoin Standard and one of the most hardcore Bitcoin maximalists. Writes about Milei's astonishing shitcoinery, shocking even for shitcoiners, so even the gamblers who are shitcoiners are amazed here. He marketed a shitcoin to support Argentina's growth, received millions of dollars from fans around the world, launched his coin, causing the coin's value to crash by 95%, and now expects everyone to just move on. Now he's just standing there saying, okay, sorry bro, I didn't know anything about it, and so on. So yeah, I have no idea what to say about that. And now we come to the part where Bitcoin is essential because Pierre Roger writes that a crypto hyperinflation is coming, which will bring forth many new Bitcoin maximalists. Many people have to learn it the hard way. The easy way is simply to go with Bitcoin, but the hard way is to invest in these meme coin projects, lose a lot of money, and then switch to Bitcoin. And often the most extreme Bitcoin maximalists or Bitcoin fundamentalists are those who have been rug pulled the hardest. And people who haven't yet burned their money massively are the ones who say, yeah, I have some cool coins going, and I can make massive gains with Melania coin, massive returns, even though it has no fundamentals to support the coin. But people just ride the hype wave here. They go with the hype instead of taking 2 seconds to think, okay, is there a use case here? Does it make any sense that this thing will still exist in 10 years? What are the fundamentals of the whole story? But no, they don't do any research. They just go along with the hype. But Beer Rochit says the whole thing is good for Bitcoin. It will burn some people, but that's necessary here. Sometimes you have to hold your hand in the fire to really understand what's going on. This was on Natalie Brunell's podcast, where military expert Douglas McGregor was a guest. He has also been on Bitcoin podcasts several times and is really deeply involved in Bitcoin topics. Usually, there are always warnings about some crash, Bitcoin is crashing now, and then it's all terrible, doomsday, and so on. However, he says that a massive economic crash is coming our way and Bitcoin will be the big beneficiary. Many people also assume that a recession will come this year, that a massive drawback will occur this year, which is not related to Bitcoin, but rather to the general economic conditions. We simply have the problem that, on one hand, we have inflation issues in the USA, meaning we actually need to raise interest rates, but then we have the problem that we drive into a recession, and then we basically have an economic crash ahead of us. This means we have, on one hand, a recession that we can steer into or are steering into, or on the other hand, a hyperinflation that we are steering into. It's of course a bit exaggerated, but in the end, there are these two sides, these two dangers, meaning on one side a strong loss of monetary value, and on the other side a potential recession, and finding the balance here is very, very difficult. And now the military expert would be asked what he thinks about a strategic Bitcoin reserve, but then he elaborates and explains why he sees a massive economic crash coming our way and what consequences that has for Bitcoin, because the consequences here are different than expected.
I wanted to ask you about Bitcoin because there has been talk of potentially a strategic Bitcoin reserve, and Trump is the very first Bitcoin-friendly president. Do you think that this could happen?
Yes, I think it can. I think it probably will. And I also think that Bitcoin will continue to fall. And when the stock market crashes, I think Bitcoin will go down with it. The stock market will not recover because it's grossly overpriced, and it's going to take years for us to recover from what's coming. But Bitcoin will recover. It'll recover, and I think it'll recover quickly. And so it will be this store of value in addition to gold and silver that is indisputable. So I think that will happen. Again, I'm not Nostradamus. That's my view. That's my gut. And I would urge people to think in those terms. But I think President Trump was quite serious when he said we're going to look at a Bitcoin strategic reserve. So was RFK Jr. So I think we'll see something like that emerge.
The special guest elaborates on the nature of the potential crash, emphasizing that it is not the typical scenario where Bitcoin's value plummets significantly. Instead, he highlights that according to BlackRock, Bitcoin is expected to bounce back swiftly due to specific developments and dynamics currently unfolding within the Bitcoin market. So many people we know from the past, when something crashes down, it sometimes takes a long time to recover, for example. The Great Depression or whatever else there was, or a crash, it sometimes took a long time for the markets to recover. But with Bitcoin, it's different. Bitcoin will recover more quickly here, as we saw during the COVID crisis, how Bitcoin recovered relatively quickly. And as I said, there's also the BlackRock report where you can see various patterns of how Bitcoin sometimes recovers faster. But that also includes gold and silver as well. The problem is, what I'm saying here is that the stock market is generally inflated, meaning we have an overvalued stock market, which is naturally related to the entire fiat money system because the fiat money is broken, then the stock market inflates, not just the stock market, but also the real estate market, and here the crash, which might be triggered by a recession, will lead to the stock markets not recovering for a long time because the question is, what can central banks do then? They save such a crash again because in the past it was like this, they pumped massive liquidity into the system so they could, let's say, correct the crash relatively quickly. That's how it was during the Corona time as well. Bitcoin recovered faster than the stock markets, but in general, the stock markets also recovered way too quickly because so much capital was pumped into the market. If so much capital hadn't been pumped in, the crash would have lasted much longer and would have dragged on. Now, military expert Douglas McGregor assumes that this time the crash will drag on much further because the problem is that we have to keep pumping more and more capital to buffer these crashes. Eventually, there will be an end, and at some point, there might be an everything crash or an Armageddon crash or something like that. But Bitcoin will emerge as the winner from this Armageddon crash, or whatever it will be called. And that is a very, very positive analysis from him. Additionally, he says a strategic Bitcoin reserve is very, very likely or quite possible. Donald Trump is considering it, and he definitely assumes that this will happen. As far as I know, he must be in direct contact with Donald Trump because, as a military expert, he has done many things in US military history. I believe he is now retired or something like that. I researched a bit, and during the Gulf War and whatnot, he was very, very involved. Nowadays, there's only a Bitcoin podcast to be seen, but his assessment is very, very intriguing. Feel free to write in the comments below if you also see it this way, that Bitcoin might not come out negatively from a crash, but could actually benefit from it. Of course, Bitcoin will initially be pulled down by the downward momentum, but then we have a very, very steep recovery. The weak hands are shaken out, people have another opportunity to buy more, and those who are holding long-term benefit the most. Guys, if you still want to buy Bitcoin, check out the link below. I'll include a link to 21 Bitcoin, where you can easily and securely buy Bitcoin. With the code BitcoinHotel, you can get up to 20% off the fees when purchasing Bitcoin. Highly recommended for anyone who still wants to buy Bitcoin now. Guys, see you later. Peace out.